As we all know, late last week the UFC randomly announced Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira 2, which honestly caught me off guard, especially since Chandler's been stuck in purgatory for almost about 2 years waiting for Conor. However, I will say that I'm kind of glad that Chandler finally decided to move on. I mean, he probably spent more time waiting for Conor than Conor spends pretending to be a UFC fighter these days, you know what I'm saying? But all jokes aside, I never really thought Conor was going to fight Chandler. I think he was just messing with him this entire time. That being said, this fight, or rematch I should say, is pretty interesting. It's a huge matchup in general, but I had to ask myself, why is this even happening? I mean, this fight does nothing for Charles Oliveira. He already beat Michael Chandler years ago, and Chandler lost his last fight to Dustin Poirier back in 2022. In fact, Chandler is 2-3 in his UFC career. The guy hasn't been active, and personally, as a fan, I'd love to see something new from both of them. Instead of a rematch, I'd much rather see these guys face fresh contenders, especially those that are climbing the rankings. I mean, for an example, we could have got Chandler versus Rafael Fiziev. That would have been a badass fight, man. And then you could have put up Charles Oliveira versus Dan Hooker, and those are like two fresh matchups, and it would have been cool to see. As for this rematch, there's just not a lot of hype around it for me, and probably not for the general audience either. The first time they fought, it was for the belt, and both guys had serious momentum. Now, Charles just lost a close fight to Arman Tsarukyan, and Chandler hasn't won a fight since 2022. And look, man, I like Chandler, but him going around social media saying that if he beats Oliveira, it's gonna get him a title shot, I'm just not on board with that. Honestly, this guy's got what I like to call Dana White privileges. Even if he knocks out Oliveira, I still think he needs to beat another top 5 fighter before even sniffing another title shot. No one is saying it but him, but let's be real, I wouldn't put it past the UFC to actually give him a title shot. That being said, I wanted to mention that this is a huge gamble for Michael Chandler, because if he does lose this fight, he kind of loses everything. And what I mean from this is that he'll be out of title contention, and he'll probably lose the Conor McGregor fight that he's been eyeing, you know. He said he's interested in fighting Conor after he beats Oliveira. I could totally see Oliveira swooping in and getting the McGregor fight instead. At that point, Chandler's gonna look like the biggest fool in UFC history. He'll have wasted 2 years of his career, no Conor fight, and he's out of the top 5. And I've been noticing that a lot of MMA fans are hitting social media and tweeting that this is an easy win for Oliveira. And to that, I'm just like, bro, what are you even talking about? Just because he won the first fight doesn't mean this is gonna be like some guaranteed walk in the park for Oliveira. The first fight was absolutely crazy, and Chandler came this close to winning. I feel like a lot of people forget how that fight actually played out. By the end of the first round, it looked like Chandler was about to finish Charles Oliveira. And then the second round, out of nowhere, Oliveira pulled off the TKO. And it wasn't some easy fight, so I don't know where this easy win talk is coming from. And I almost forgot to mention that this fight is a big risk for Oliveira. If he loses this fight, it's going to be by a knockout. There's just no way Chandler is going to win by decision. I mean, Chandler winning by decision just doesn't belong in the same sentence. This guy goes in there swinging like he's trying to take your head off in the first round. He's not trying to rack up points, but if Oliveira gets knocked out, oh man, the internet's going to lose its mind. You can already hear the fans now pushing the whole Charles was overrated, overhyped, yada yada, his chin was shot, he's washed up narrative. And let's be real, if Chandler lands a big one and flatlines Oliveira, that's probably all we're gonna hear for months. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm obviously still going with Charles, which I'll explain why in a bit, but let's be real here. Chandler in the first round is basically the lightweight version of Yoel Romero. The dude is just straight up explosive, like he's running on every steroid imaginable. He starts throwing those big meaty hooks like Lucas Tracy used to say. But yeah, his fight IQ might be questionable, but Chandler usually wins the first round because of his power and his explosiveness. It's just insane. Those overhands are terrifying. There's a reason he knocked out Dan Hooker. And when Chandler starts throwing, you can't help but think this dude's got some scary ass freaking power, man. And look, I know what you're gonna say. Chandler hasn't fought in almost 2 years. And yes, ring rust is a real thing. But man, I've seen him train and this guy is still an absolute freak. first round Chandler is terrifying. That being said, if Oliveira can survive the first round, it should get easier for him. Chandler tends to slow down after that first round. He normally becomes more stationary and it's easier to hit him. His defense overall isn't the greatest just to begin with, but second round Chandler's defense is absolutely trash. And what makes this matchup especially dangerous for Charles is his lack of solid defense. I mean, there's a reason why Chandler almost finished him in their first fight. And how many times have we seen Charles get dropped in his career? That's what makes the first round so dangerous for him in this fight. Chandler came very close to getting that TKO in the first fight. For an example, in the fight against Arman, I expected him to bring his unusual pressure, but instead he kept backing up, and it's this inconsistency that adds another layer of unpredictability to how he'll approach a fight like this one. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the first fight between Chandler and Oliveira, it was mostly Oliveira backing up in the first round. I'm worried that Chandler is going to impose his will and potentially knock out Oliveira. I hate to say it, but if Chandler fights smart too, which I doubt, he might take Oliveira down and just try to control him on the ground, trying to ride out the round. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but apparently he has a game plan from what I hear, and he can try to press them against the cage in Oliveira's guard and just stay there. And Chandler is tough to submit in general, especially early on. I know Dustin did it, but that was in the third round when Chandler's fight IQ failed him. And just in general, in the first round, he's like a tank, almost unsubmittable. Even with all that being said, I'm still riding with Charles though. I'm just nervous. I believe Charles can survive that first round, and I could even see Charles land something big to knock out Chandler eventually. And look, man, I don't think Chandler is going to shoot for a takedown too, because he won't want to risk getting caught in the guillotine. The only way I see it going to the ground is if Charles shoots for a takedown like he did in the first fight, but I doubt that he'll do it this time. As explosive as Chandler is, his biggest weakness has always been his defense. Even Tony Ferguson dropped him, and that's his main issue. What I'm trying to say is Chandler is dangerous, but he's also very hittable. And yeah, I'll admit I was a little bit hesitant about Charles when it came to a stand-up game in that fight against Arman. He didn't seem as sharp or aggressive as I expected, and he spent a lot of time backing up, which had me questioning his confidence. But honestly, I feel like we're going to see a different version of Charles in this fight with Chandler. I mean, let's not forget he already has that win over Chandler in the first fight. That's going to give him a psychological edge, knowing that he's been in there with Chandler and managed to come out on top, especially when things were looking shaky for him in that first round. Because of that, I really do think Oliveira is going to come into this fight with more confidence. He knows he can handle Chandler's power and weather that first round storm. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Charles press forward a lot more and be more aggressive this time around. It's just like when he fought Beneil Dariush. Charles just came out, took the fight to him, and completely imposed his will. He didn't wait for Beneil to get comfortable or find his rhythm. He went in there and put on the pressure and took control of the fight from the start. And I expect something similar against Chandler. And I think Charles knows that if he lets Chandler dictate the pace in the early rounds, he's putting himself in danger. But if he can push forward and make Chandler uncomfortable and get Chandler on the back foot, he's going to find openings, just like he did against Dariush. Now, let's not forget that Charles has some serious knockout power. I mean, this is the same guy who sent Gaethje flying across the octagon. And let's be real, Chandler might just go in there just like the same old Chandler trying to entertain the fans with a brawl that will eventually leave him open to getting knocked out again. With all that being said, my early prediction is that Charles Oliveira finishes Michael Chandler in the first round, maybe the second, who knows. I just feel like it's going to be a repeat of their first fight, and somehow Charles is going to catch Chandler and knock him out. Either way, this fight is going to be insane, and I doubt it's going to top the craziness of the first fight because that fight was completely insane. But hey, you never know. But anyways, guys, what do you guys think? Do you guys think Charles is going to run through Michael Chandler, or are we going to see another crazy war? And could Chandler pull off the upset like I mentioned earlier? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, guys, I'll see you guys on my next one.